Thank you, Tim. Again, for those of you uh, who participate on these monthly meetings, we're certainly very thrilled that Vice Admiral Topshee has accepted our invitation to speak with us this evening. And as some of you may know, he was actually born in Nepean, here in the Ottawa area, and he joined the Canadian Forces in 1990 and attended RMC. But I think it took him 6 years, or 6 years of schooling, but I'll come back to that as to why it was 6 years later. But he did a short stint in the Directorate of Maritime Force Development at National Defence Headquarters, and Vice Admiral Topshee completed his naval warfare officer training and joined his first ship, Winnipeg, in 1997. His early sea time included appointments as navigating officer, operations officer, and combat officer on Canada's Pacific coast. He was XO of HMCS St. John's in 2006, then Toronto in 2007, after which he was posted at NDHQ, the Directorate of Maritime Strategy in Ottawa, and returned to sea in 2009 as CEO of Algonquin, which at the time was a flagship of Canada's Pacific Fleet. His time aboard Algonquin, according to him, was easily the highlight of his career, and included high readiness workups, up podium. You may recall that was the security for the Vancouver 2010 Olympics, and also he deployed up at Pacific Amistad. It was a 5-month deployment in Central and Western Pacific. Certainly a piece of geography of great interest to everyone these days. So at the end of 2010, he did something completely different. It was an assignment to the NATO training mission in Afghanistan, where he spent a year based in Kabul as the director of Afghan National Police training operations. And he did that with a colleague of mine who was a police officer in the Vancouver Police Department, Major General Rob Roy McKenzie, for whom I work now at D&D. So, but upon his return from Afghanistan, he was part of the Canadian Pacific Fleet staff for about 6 months, leading up to his role as Director of Operations for exercise Rim of the Pacific 2012. So in the summer of that year, he returned east to assume command of Canadian Forces Base at Halifax, a position he held for about 3 years, being promoted to Commodore and assigned as the Deputy Director of Strategy, Policy, and Plans Directorate at NORAD and United States Northern Command, Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. So in 2018, he returned back to the West Coast to take command of Canadian Fleet Pacific. He was then promoted to Rear Admiral and took command of Maritime Forces Pacific and Joint Task Force Maritime Pacific from 2021 to May 2022. And it was in May of this year that Vice Admiral Topshee was promoted to his current rank and assumed command as of the RCN as the 38th Kraken. So as a student at RMC, Vice Admiral Topshee was selected for a 6-month term on exchange at the Australian Defence Force Academy. Upon graduation, though, from RMC in 1984, he was awarded the Canada Memorial Scholarship and in 1996 earned a Master's of Literature and Strategic Studies from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, hence the 6 years of education. So in 2005, he was selected to attend the NCS 10 course at the United States Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. And he also attended the National Security Program at CFC College in Toronto. I also understand from a previous speaker of the NAC that he also knows how to put on a reception and turkey dinner and with unparalleled efficiency. So at least that's the rumor that we heard from our previous speaker. so he can confirm or deny. Tonight, so as the 30th commander of the RCN, Vice Admiral Topshee will share his perspective on the state of the Royal Canadian Navy. Admiral, over to you.
Well, Ray, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I am not going to comment about turkey dinners or anything else. I also want to acknowledge that I was delighted to see in the audience Dave Hudock, because I think that the first commanding officer that one has in your career is such a formative experience, and he certainly shaped my understanding of what a captain of a ship was like. And it's been a driving force for me ever since then to make sure that we create the best possible commanding officers for all of our sailors and officers as they join the fleet, so that we set the example right from the beginning. I will also note, and I'm not going to call out everybody in the audience, but I can't resist pointing out that Chris Sutherland is one of the guests, because this morning he was kind enough to point out and to remind me that the NAC stood for the Naval Association of Canada and not the National Arts Centre, in case I was confused. So I can remind Chris that no, I'm well aware of the difference. I've been a member and very proud of that membership, though I did have to explain to my mother the difference between them. So anyway, thank you very much for having me join you this evening. I really do appreciate the great work that the Naval Association of Canada does to support the Navy, to really try and build a strategic dialogue within Canada about the importance of the Navy to Canada, of the importance of the maritime domain to Canada, the fact that we are a nation with 3 coasts. My goal tonight is not to talk for a long time, but to just really a few things, and then you're a very knowledgeable audience. I think that we will take us in a direction, and so I'd love to do that. You're up to date today. So I have got a grand total of 6 months and 6 days in the job. So I'm at the point where I'm suddenly dawned at the moment. When I took command, I set out 3 priorities in my flag hoist signal: people, platforms, and being ready to fight. 6 months into the job, I am more convinced than ever that those are the right 3 priorities. And so that's how I'll frame my comments this evening. With respect to people, there's no doubt that we are short. We're short officially 1,400 sailors in the regular force, about 1,400 sailors in the reserves, and we would welcome more civilian employees. We have the money to hire more at both of the fleet maintenance facilities, but are struggling in the current labor environment to be able to recruit more sailors, more workers into any of the aspects of the Navy's team. And so that's certainly shaped a lot of what we're trying to do right now. 1,400 sailors represents nearly 20% of the Navy's strength. I'm reassured in a sense by the fact that from the moment I joined, I was told that we're short positions, but the numbers continued to grow, and I think we're now at the point where it is challenging us to make sure that we make the best use of each and every person in the Navy. And so we're really focused on making sure that we create the best possible culture within the Navy, because when you're short as many people as we are, then we need everybody performing to their full potential. And that means that we need to make sure that they are engaged, motivated, that they feel as though it's a welcoming and inclusive environment where everybody is free to be themselves. So in a sense, culture is core to what we do, not because we're trying to set some sort of woke agenda or anything else like that, but in order to be the best that we can be, we need the best out of all of our people. And so we've really been focused on making sure that we create that environment where everybody feels as though their contributions are valued and contributing each and every day. The other thing about people is that, we have the solution to our problem in our ranks already. The basic training list for the regular force is about 1,300 people, and the reserve force, it's over 1,000 people as well. So one of the priorities right now is really how do we convert all of those people who are in their initial phase of Navy training into fully qualified sailors and officers to support us. And that's more challenging than you might appreciate. For those of you who are of a Mars background, right now there are nearly 200 officers awaiting training amongst naval warfare officers. And the delay between Naval Warfare Officer Phase 2 and Phase 3 can be as much as a year because of a series of factors that have just built up over time. So we're working to tackle that aggressively and make sure that we get everybody through the training pipeline as quickly as possible. And that means really looking at every aspect of our business and make sure it's prioritized and focused on people and producing people with the right qualifications at time. We, navies have always been organizations that learn at sea by doing, by being mentored into the job, learning how to do the job of the person above you, being assisted in learning the ropes, literally. And so we're going to try and repatriate a lot of that training back into the fleet, but to do it in a way that manages and mitigates the risk of bringing people with less experience than we might have had in the past. But I think that this is a space where it is appropriate for us to take more risk, because those with a lot of experience, we really need to push them back into the training system to train that next generation of sailors. And so there is no doubt whatsoever that people is my number one priority. One of the additional things we're doing is something that I think we're now calling the Naval Experience Program. So it is a challenge to join the Canadian Armed Forces right now. The Canadian Forces recruiting group is doing the best that they can to improve their system, their processing of things. But for a series of different reasons, the median time to join the Canadian Armed Forces right now is about 240 days from the time you submit your application to the time where you're formally enrolled. And so median time at 240 days, meaning that half the files take longer than that. And so we are working a pilot project to try and expedite that entry into the Navy. And so it's a unique and interesting thing that you might hear a bit about, because we're hoping to launch it around April 1st of next year, start to publicize it early in the new year. But it's going to be where we recruit Canadians directly off the street. We bring them into our ranks on a 1-year engagement. So it'll sound a lot like YTEP for those of you who remember it. And beyond that 1 year, there's no commitment. The first 3 months will be spent doing basic military qualification training, basic training, followed by NETP, the Naval Environmental Training Program, to make you fully qualified to be a sailor on any one of our ships. After that, we're going to send you to a coast and get you exposed to the Navy. Ideally, that would mean going straight to a ship, but the reality of how many ships we have and how often they're sailing means that we're going to create an experiential environment around all of the different occupations of the Navy. These new sailors will have an occupation that's simply known as sailor. And over the remaining 9 months of their 1 year, we're going to give them an exposure to the Navy. We're going to hope that they understand how to deal with the environment, if they've got any issues with seasickness, to manage the lifestyle of sailing. Ideally, we'll get them onto a deployment for at least a month where they fly in and have a part of the experience of seeing the world, part of the Navy value proposition. And then if we're satisfied that they have the values and ethics that we're looking for, that they are the right sort of fit for us, then we'll offer them a contract to stay for longer, the initial engagement of 3 to 5 years if they want, and assign them to an occupation. By this point, they'll have actually seen what all the different occupations are, so hopefully we'll have a better understanding of the difference between an NCI app, a WENGTech, a MARTech, and all of the different options within the Navy. The Australian Navy has got a similar program, and they're finding about an 80% conversion rate. So we're really excited to give this a try. And we think that there's a demand amongst young Canadians right now who aren't sure what they want to do with their lives to go try something different, see a bit of the world, gain some experience along the ways. And if we can create the sort of inclusive, welcoming environment that we think we can, where we really show people how to be their best selves, we think many of them will join our ranks. And that also meets Madame Arbour's recommendation of a probationary period of entry, where we don't just bring someone into the Canadian Armed Forces and give them a 35-year career right off the bat, but we make sure that they are the right fit for us as well. So that's the exciting new initiative that we're looking at as one of the ways that we'll tackle the people problem. The other aspect is to make sure we're really focused on retention, and that we look at all of the reasons why people leave, the opportunities that they might see for themselves outside of the Navy. And I'm excited by the fact that the trial occupation for the Navy is going to be the maritime technician trade. So MARTECs, the amalgamation of stokers, electricians, and hull techs, and that's going to be where we start, because we know that trade has been challenged lately, and is a trade that is in high demand across industry and in other navies. So we're going to start the efforts at making sure that we do everything we can to retain the people that we've already got, with a closer examination of everything in MARTEC to make sure that we create the best possible environment for them. The rest of the people side really is we're looking to the future. We're excited by the Canadian Surface Combatant coming down the road. It's going to involve the Aegis combat system, which is used by the Americans, the Australians, and a number of other navies. It is a bit of a cultural journey because it's a different way of doing business. And we know that the Canadian Surface Combatant is only going to have 210 bunks on it. It's going to be a more capable ship than the frigates. It's going to have a lot of new warfare areas that we need to be mindful of, a lot of new things that will require people, and yet the crew will be about 20% smaller. So because of that need to really focus on how we make best use of our people, we're sort of keeping an eye to looking to the future of what the occupations will have to look like to make Canadian Surface Combatant effective, and then bringing them back to the present and figuring out how can that inform how we operate the current Halifax class. Right now, Winnipeg and Vancouver came back from a 6-month deployment today. Both of them sailed with around 250 sailors, which for those of you who remember the Halifax class at the beginning, might say, well, there weren't enough bunks for that, but over time, we've always added a bunch of extra bunks, a lot of extra responsibility. We're going to look back and figure out how do we get back to being able to operate those ships to their full capability with only about 150 core crew doing all of the warfare missions. That is a significant challenge, but one that I think that we're ready to take on, because that's going to be how we create the capacity to train the people that we need to bring into the Navy to get us through this current personnel moment. So there's a lot going on the personnel front. And I'm happy to go wherever you'd like to go in terms of questions later on. As far as platforms go, the interesting, it is a really great moment for us as we're taking delivery of new ships for the first time in, I guess 30 years since the commissioning of the Halifax class and the Maritime Coastal Defense vessels. The Arctic and offshore patrol ships with Harry DeWolf as the lead vessel of the class have been absolutely fantastic. Those ships have outperformed the specifications in terms of their ability to go through ice, their ability to operate in the high north and in the tropics. And in fact, they are proven to be globally deployable. They've got a relatively small crew of about 65 people for a very large ship that displaces nearly, over 7,000 tons. So it's a lot of ship for a small crew to take care of, but they've proven that they're able to do so. They've got all of the right connectors, the ship's boats, a landing craft, helicopters, so we're working to make sure that they can embark a Cyclone helicopter. We've proven the ability to do so. We just got to refine the engineering to be able to do it on a sustained basis. They are the first true littoral ship that the Canadian Navy has had in a long time. They have the ability to influence events on land, and they've proven that ability up in the north as they operate throughout the Canadian Arctic archipelago and have impact in the communities up there through the things that they're able to bring ashore, the influence they're able to have on the land side. And to the point where the Army commander has already been probing me and asking me how we can do more to leverage the capability that those ships offer. They also seem ideal for a constabulary role around the world as we realize the challenge that we face with fishing. There are many countries of the world where they're really struggling to create, to find enough protein and food for their population. A lot of that has to do with illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And so the Harry DeWolf class offers us an opportunity to take a look at that mission around the world and potentially contribute to it with something that's the right size. A frigate has always been too much for that type of constabulary role. The Harry DeWolf class has the ability to go and do it. So you're probably going to see a lot more of that class of ships and a realization that 6 really is the bare minimum that we need to be able to be effective with all of the things that we can do with that class. The joint support ship across in Vancouver right now is, it's about 95% complete, the future HMCS Protector. So we're really excited to see something that looks like a ship on the outside. Still a lot of work to be done fitting out the inside, launching it, fitting it up, and delivering it probably in 2025. And that's going to restore a replenishment capability of the Royal Canadian Navy, which right now we're managing quite well with Asterix. But I ask you to keep in mind that Asterix is all about maintaining the replenishment skills of the fleet more than actually providing fuel at sea. So it absolutely does that. But the value proposition for Asterix is the fact that on board that ship, we've always got between 20 and 40 sailors assigned to replenishment duties, doing the business of learning how to be the supply ship in a replenishment at sea so we don't lose that perishable skill. Then we're also building the Canadian Surface Combatant. The intent remains to begin what we're calling low rate production. So start building the ship in about 2024, cutting steel on the actual first of class sometime that year as well. We are expecting to complete what's called preliminary design review later this month, meaning we'll know exactly what the systems are that are going to be in that ship. And then we'll do the detailed work of making sure that they all fit together, that everything works, that it's got the right power and cooling and everything else to make the different combat systems of the ship work. What we're going to get in the Canadian Surface Combatant is really exciting. It's going to restore a lot of capability to the Navy that we haven't had for a while. I'm calling it, I've taken to calling it a destroyer because I think it truly fits the definition of a destroyer, a ship that brings some capability across all areas of warfare and is capable of being in the front line of battle. The Canadian Surface Combatant is definitely the right ship for Canada, and we're really excited that we're getting quite serious about actually building and delivering this ship. You know, it's never going to happen as fast as I would like, but it is happening, and it is going to be a significant enhancement for the Canadian Navy. As far as platforms go, I also have to mention, the Halifax class. The reality is, because the Canadian Surface Combatant, realistically, the earliest we're going to be able to start decommissioning the Halifax class is in the late 2030s. And so we're talking about extending the life of the Halifax class for another 15 years plus. And that means that today's fleet is the future fleet. And so we're planning for several more refit cycles for each of the ships and making sure that the capability the Halifax class has is fit for purpose today. And that we remain, that we're doing the maintenance we need to do to make sure that those ships continue to be effective no matter where we deploy them. The reality is that with 12 ships, that are all more than 25 years old now, we need to spend a fair amount of time maintaining them. And so docking work periods are now over a year for all ships, which means, and it effectively becomes about a 2-year refit cycle to take the equipment off of the ship, get it ready for the docking work period, put it through the docking work period, and then restore all of the combat equipment and ramp it back up for service. That is pretty much a 2-year process that involves the Davie Yard in Quebec, the Irving Yard in Halifax, and the Vic Ships Yard here in Victoria. And so as a result, it means that we've really only got 3 ships available on each coast for operations at a given time. And that is challenging because it means that we're trying to make do with fewer frontline combatants than we would ideally like to have. But we're managing it quite well, as you can see from Winnipeg and Vancouver coming back today. It is, the ships remain very capable. We are going to continue to deploy 2 Halifax class from each coast every year. In the first half of the year, the 2 ships will deploy from Halifax. They'll both go across the Atlantic. One will stop and do op reassurance to support NATO operations in Europe, so that traditional sniffle, snimig type deployment. And the other one's going to carry on through the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, south of India, and into Indo-Asia Pacific, where it'll operate for a period of time. And in normal years, we'll come back through that same routing, back through the, around the India, Suez Canal, Mediterranean, join up with the other ship, and then come back across the Atlantic together. So the East Coast will be focused on deploying 2 ships in the front half of the year. The second half of the year, it'll be the West Coast's turn. They'll deploy 2 frigates across the Pacific Ocean in RIMPAC years. They'll begin with RIMPAC, then they'll carry on to East Asia and Oceania, conducting operations for about 4 months and then returning home shortly before Christmas. What that does is it sets it up so that each coast is focused on force generation, training the Navy, doing things like the Operations Room Officer course, Navy exercises in one half of the year, and operational deployments in the other half of the year. It does mean that we're going to be challenged on each coast for a period of time where there will only be 1 frigate available, and at times it will have to go into a shorter period. But we're confident that we can manage these gaps because we're now operating a multifaceted fleet, which involves also the Harry DeWolf, which bring a lot of capability, and we're leveraging the maritime coastal defense vessels more than ever. And so, in case you're wondering, okay, what about op reassurance and NATO? It's not that we're stopping that mission at all. In fact, what we're doing is we're realizing that with the fleet mix that we've got today, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in NATO that can be really well done by a maritime coastal defense vessel or by one of our submarines. And so we proved that this year with the Kingston and Summerside deployments, where they went across and did mine countermeasures in an operational capacity for the first time in many years. And I think what we've seen with the Nord Stream events in the Baltic, that there's an increasing importance to that ability to understand and manage the subsea environment, what the US Navy is now calling subsurface warfare or seabed warfare. So beyond ASW, but into the full spectrum of more than just mine countermeasures, but understanding all of the different cables and infrastructure that are on the seabed and how to make sure that we understand and protect those as well. And we're also going to use our submarines in support of op reassurance. And so it's not that we're ignoring NATO, it's just we're changing the fleet mix, recognizing that for Indo-Asia Pacific, the only answer really, when you're talking about the challenges of that theater, is a frigate. For other areas, there's a mix of different assets that we can use to meet the requirements of the Government of Canada. So no increase in our overall deployments, but a refocusing of the frigate effort towards Indo-Pacific, and with the rest of the force picking up the slack in other areas. And the final part of the platforms is submarines. We are working to meet the government's announced direction back in April of this year that we should look at a Victoria-class replacement. So the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project has been stood up, and we're in the initial days of that, but looking at how do we develop the right submarine capability for Canada. We're very aware of the fact that the Victoria-class decommissions in 2034. So that's the first of class. We'll start decommissioning at that point. All of the submarines will be decommissioned by 2040. So the clock is already ticking to make sure we deliver a submarine capability in time to avoid the capability gap we saw between the Oberons and the Victoria. So the team is pretty focused on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the different types of options that we're exploring. But the reality is that this will be what we call a military off-the-shelf procurement. So we will be looking to buy a submarine that is built overseas and then bring it back to Canada, where we will maintain and operate it going forward. And so that's really it for platforms. I can go into detail about some of the lesser things, the other capabilities that we operate, including the Naval Security Team, the Naval Tactical Operations Group, the Fleet Diving Unit. There's a whole host of things that go into creating the capability for the Navy. But finally, I wanted to touch on being ready to fight. We've all recognized that we're in an era of returned strategic competition. Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has really reminded all of us that the world is a dangerous place, and that as much as we have appreciated the rules-based international order that has allowed so much of the world to prosper and that has brought so many people out of poverty, not all countries in the world agree with this rules-based international order and are prepared to challenge it by force if necessary. And so we're very conscious of the implications of Russia's aggression over the last decade, and in particular the invasion of Ukraine. So we're looking at that. I think the sinking of the Moskva was a telling incident to say that we need to make sure that ship was the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. It was their air defense cruiser. It was the thing designed to defend everybody else against an air attack, and yet it was sunk by a couple of anti-ship missiles. I'm also very mindful of back when I was in command of Algonquin, the Korean corvette, the Chonan, was sunk by North Korea in March of 2010. And 42 Korean sailors lost their lives because of an attack by a North Korean midget submarine. The world can be a dangerous place for navies, and we need to be prepared because that danger seems to be increasing. And so I have charged the two fleet commanders and the Commander Canadian Submarine Force with making sure that our fleets are truly ready to fight, that our sailors have wrapped their heads around what it means to be in naval combat at sea, and that we are ready to tap into the innovation and initiative of all of our sailors. What Ukraine has achieved as a very small country being attacked by a very large military, what they've done is truly remarkable. That type of innovation and initiative is something that we need to harness and we need to embrace in the Canadian Navy. The legacy of the Canadian Navy has always been, we may not have had the best ships, but we've got the best sailors, and we operate them better than anyone else. And we learn how to fight. We learn how to fight using whatever we have at hand and turning it into an effective weapon of war when necessary. And so that is a spirit that we're really trying to reawaken within the force. We're also realistic about what our capability is right now. The Halifax-class frigate is an extremely capable platform. The Halifax-class modernization of the last decade delivered a combat system that is capable and fit for purpose for today. but it doesn't include air defense. It has left us with a ship that is capable of defending itself, but not much more. And with its limited armament, we have to understand that it is, going to be challenged to sustain conflict as we have currently configured the force. And the Chief of the Defense Staff has been pretty clear that we need to buy more ammunition, more spares, more parts to make sure that we can sustain operations beyond that first 5 minutes of conflict. And so we're working hard to do that. And we're very conscious of the fact that, we should focus on an area where we offer a genuine value proposition to our allies, and that's going back to our heritage as an anti-submarine warfare Navy. Because we have a world-leading capability when you consider the Aurora Block 4 aircraft, the Cyclone helicopter, and the underwater suite upgrade that we're delivering to the Halifax class. So we have a Navy that is capable of being world leaders in anti-submarine warfare, and we intend to focus on that to make sure that our allies look to us for assistance in that area. That we're not someone that is a burden to their operations, but an addition. And creating the right environment to make sure that we realize that ambition is critical. And so at the end of the day, how do we get there? Well, it all comes back to people and culture. Making sure that we've got enough sailors with the right level of training and the right culture where they really are inspired to and listened to when they've got a good idea. So that no matter what rank or experience someone might have, if they've got a way to make things better, that we're listening to them and enabling them in achieving that opportunity, and that we're tapping into everyone's full potential. So that was a very quick overview of the Navy, couched in my 3 priorities of people, platforms, and being ready to fight. And with that, I'm happy to go to your questions.